Hey guys, welcome to today's video on eating for peak performance, considering meal timings and circadian rhythm. So if you've been thinking about when do I eat, am I eating in the optimal way for me, how can I improve not just what I eat, but how I eat, then you're gonna love this video because I'm gonna share some insights that are going to allow you to be eating for energy. And if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Elika. I'm an energy optimization coach and a trusted advisor for business leaders and entrepreneurs who want to optimize their energy to be able to create a bigger impact in the world. So if you like the sound of that, then what are you waiting for? Subscribe so that you can be on top of all the lifestyle habits and hacks that I share that are real life experiences on managing our personal energy. So let's go into today's video. So I want to talk firstly about circadian rhythm. So this is something that people are more familiar with, unlike infradian rhythm, which I will mention. But circadian rhythm is the 24-hour biological cycle. It's the biological clock that we work to. Now, I will just say it's important to point out that men are governed by this cycle energetically way more than women. But considering that men went off the land first and built the workplace, and then women entered the workplace afterwards, our natural rhythms of our day are pretty much governed to circadian rhythm. That's because if you think about the traditional workplace environment, it has been designed around the 9 till 5. It's been designed around circadian rhythm. And we are slowly moving away from that, but our work is something that governs for so many of us our natural cycles and how our energy is shifted throughout a typical day. I also just want to honor the sun and the sun cycle. So every single day we experience the sunrise and sunset to circadian rhythm. And the sun being our largest, most efficient, most freest, most powerful energy source, it really governs what we do. Like, think about how the sun impacts what you choose to do every day. I absolutely know that, living in the tropics compared to living in England, that the sun completely has revolutionized how my day is operating. So when we look at the 24-hour biological cycle, then it's really easy to think about how do we fit our eating patterns within that? Or another way is really, how is our eating cycle being influenced by that 24-hour biological cycle? And that's what I want to talk about today. So let's start with a little bit of the history of why we eat the way we do. Yeah, this is going to be really important, I think, for just setting out like what you choose to do, because at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? There is no right or wrong, and there is no one size fits all. There's just optimization, like small shifts that all of us can do to get more out of our performance, to get more energy, to be able to create a bigger impact, because our energy is way more sustainable and much more accessible as well. So when we look at traditionally human beings, we're roaming on the land. It's so hard for us to imagine when we're in our concrete buildings and we're in our sanctuaries that this wasn't our sanctuary. Our sanctuary was out in what we now call nature. And as we roam through the land, of course, our environment played a huge part in our decision making every single day. And so the sun and the weather, if you think about it, was a huge part of that. And so the sun rising indicated so much. It indicated life and the day beginning, activity starting, because the sun created our light source, clearly. And equally, the sun setting also governed a lot of our activities. So when it comes to thinking about food, you can imagine that the sun being in the sky was governing a lot of when we would actually eat. Now, we moved away from living in that way. Obviously, started building, constructing our own home environments that created shelter. And then we go from that into more of an industrialized period of time. And in industrialization, we think of factories being built. And in factories being built, men are first coming off the land and working in these factories and producing more resources and materials for us based on this factory type of working. Women obviously followed those and moved into that. And so what you see is this shift away from eating intuitively from when we feel hunger and when the sun is impacting us. So if you think about being out on the land for hours and hours, then there were huge periods of the middle of the day when the sun was at the highest, where we would break away from working out in the land in the scorching sun. and we would retreat, and that's when we would eat. And so our food wasn't like this big meal in the morning or this big meal in the evening. It was probably in the middle of the day when we needed to fuel the rest of the day's work, and we needed to fuel the morning's work that we'd done on the land. And so what we could see from those times is we went from probably having something small like, you know, in some of the traditional cultures, they would have like soaked the rice grains, which again, they were growing on the land, and they would have drank a little bit of the water, that fermented water, which introduces all that good bacteria, something very light. And then you think about then going into the land and working in the land without a lot of substance, but then breaking as the dawn of the day comes, the sun is at the peak of the sky, and then having that meal. And you can see that in cultures like Spanish culture, where they have their siesta. And even though, we know these cultures are moving away from that, we still remember those traditions. And then when you think about then being on the land and completing the work, then you come back into the evening, and that evening was a lighter meal. Now, go from that to industrialization, where you're now scheduled around these shift working patterns. And those shift working patterns then create the meal times. So those meal times end up being breakfast when we break the fast, right, which is before working, then lunchtime, which is scheduled for that mid part of the day, so 12, 1 o'clock, and then dinner time, which was scheduled for after work. But the truth is, our biology was not designed for those hours. Our biology is different from men to women. So the men run off the 24-hour biological cycle called circadian rhythm. So the hormone pattern works great for that. Testosterone peaks in the morning, and we start to see these nuances slightly through the day and as it drips. Whereas women, our cycles are running to a 28-day cycle called the infradian cycle. So if you think about what men experience in 24 hours, we experience that over 28 days. And I do have a video that you can look through, you can watch on infradian cycle. But what that means is our hormones are a bit like spaghetti, and they're moving throughout the month. And you see this peak in the hormones as we ovulate, and then you see the dip that happens afterwards. And so it's like a bell curve that looks very different, and it's over 28 days. So again, when we think about, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what we are not doing there is we're not sensing what is our natural eating habits when we're actually really hungry, and what is controlled by our environment that wants us to start work at a certain time, take breaks at certain times, finish work at a certain time, and therefore we create our eating patterns around that. And if you can just tune into knowing that one of those things is your conditioning, that is something that you've been told and you've just automated, and then the other is the sense that you have that you're not hungry yet, that so many people say to me, I skip breakfast, or they say I fast for breakfast, but they don't fast for breakfast, because what they actually do is skip breakfast because they end up snacking on something, whether it be a coffee with sugar or milk inside it, or whether they just get, they shove something in their mouth and then skip a proper meal. That's not fasting, that's skipping a meal, and that's poor nutrition. But so many people do that because they intuitively feel that they're not hungry to actually have a proper meal yet. And I would say, as someone, that I can feel that time for me where I'm naturally ready to break the fast is around 10 o'clock. And yet I can still go all the way up to 1 o'clock because I've trained my body to be able to tap into its fat reserves when it needs to. And sometimes I just choose not to. Then when we think about the lunchtime, well, then when you start thinking about the typical lunchtime, if you skipped your breakfast, now of course you're going to really have those strong cravings, and this is where you see people obviously so much more susceptible to those carb, high sugar, processed type foods. So you're going to have the sandwiches, you're going to have the pastas, you're going to have the pizzas, or whatever it is that has the carbohydrate, typically bread, right, at lunchtime. But you're gonna crave that because your energy levels have plummeted, and yet the sun is at the peak in the sky, and so your body is really demanding from you a lot of energy to be utilized as your metabolism is soaring, and yet you haven't got that fuel inside you from your breakfast or from breaking the fast correctly. And so then we go into the dinner time where we finish, and for so many, then we haven't fueled correctly through the day already, so our body is depleted from the nutrients. And then now you finish work, and then of course there's also the social part of wanting to eat with your family or wanting to eat with your friends. And so what happens is that big meal then happens then, because you didn't really get the nutrients. Your body's now going, okay, give me it all now. And then you have this huge meal as the sun has set or is setting. And actually what the body really needs then is small nutrients, small fuel. And what it doesn't need is you to fill your digestive system with all of this food that it has to process when it's trying to prepare for your body to shut down, sleep, and recoup. So taking those into consideration, you can see that in this 24-hour biological clock, there are some things that you really want to pay a close attention to. One of them is breaking your fast. So I always say, notice that point when on a hunger scale, you feel really, really, really hungry, and eat just a bit before then, because it always takes us time to either find food or prepare food. So on a scale of 1 to 10, like if 10 is, oh my God, I'm so starving, I feel like I've not eaten in days, you want to start preparing your food when you're at about 6 or 7. And breaking the fast is most important. So what you break the fast with, you really want to fuel with whole foods that are minimally processed. So again, you'll see this in a lot of my videos, but you want to make sure that you've got clean protein sources, vegetables or fruit. I always prefer vegetables because they're higher in fiber and lower in natural sugars. And so I get all of that. And then if I want to supplement with, carbohydrates, then I add that in. But the truth be known is that the carbohydrates that I'm going to support with are going to be not processed carbohydrates. They're going to be whole foods focused, or in the occasions where it's bread for me, it's bread that I've made myself. I make a lot of my own bread with flax meals and different whole grains. So that's that. Now, once you've got that process of like really fueling your body by breaking the fast correctly, then that means that you'll naturally find that the lunchtime isn't the typical lunchtime, like 12 till 1. Like for me, if I do that at like 10 or even 11, if I push it back, sometimes even 12, of course, then I find that it's easier to go the 4 hours that you probably want to be looking for good metabolism or more without needing to eat again. So for me, that means that second meal could come around 3 o'clock. Now, if I have that second meal at 3 o'clock, then again, that's similar in terms of what I have, whole foods, minimally processed, but that evening meal, I don't really need. And so I have something very light if I need something. But typically I find that if I can get till 6 or 7 o'clock when the sun is setting here in Singapore, so again, you go by the sun, what time the sun is setting. If I can get to that time and I'm just okay, then I usually can hydrate, drink more, and I don't need to have that evening meal. Now, I'm making assumptions on that typical day that I am not going out for dinner. If I'm going out for dinner, then I slightly shift a little bit. What I'll tend to do is make sure I have a really big breakfast, and then I'll have maybe a lighter lunch and to make way for that dinner. Or I'll have a really late breakfast and I'll have it, a lot bigger, like really big. And then I really can go all that way until my evening meal. And that's just how I tweak accordingly. But hopefully you're seeing from this that stepping out of the 3 scheduled meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or even 2 scheduled meals in that way, and being able to know that you want to follow this kind of sunrise and sunset for your metabolism to be in check. Your metabolism is going to work in accordance to nature's cycle. So you're going to feel as the sun is in the high point of the sky, that's when you are able to metabolize a lot more energy. If you also think about it, you have the rest of the day. So if you were talking about 12, 1 o'clock, you have the rest of the day to use all the energy that you've absorbed from the fuel, from the food that you're eating. You have all day. Whereas if you eat that really big late dinner in the evening, you don't have much time to metabolize that. Another thing that you want to pay close attention is not just when you break the fast, but and obviously monitoring the sunrise and sunset, but not actually allowing yourself time to digest the food before you sleep. Because if you don't have that 2 to 3 hours time to digest the food before you sleep, then when you try to sleep, your body uses up to 70% of the energy to digest food. That is a lot of energy that's not being used to repair and do all of the work that we do when we sleep. So you have to check out my videos on sleep to know a little bit more about that. But yeah, so what I want to end with is just the importance of also genders, right? So just the importance of men and women knowing that in the 24 hours, we have to intuit when we are really hungry, and to try to use nature, use the sun where possible to fuel accordingly, avoiding those late dinners, avoiding skipping breakfast, and actually thinking about breaking the fast. But then for women, we also need to think about our 28 days and how do we use the seasons, and I call the seasons like winter, spring, summer, autumn. How do we use those seasons also to think about how we eat? So what we need to eat in our menstrual cycle, like when we're bleeding in those first, or however many days that is for you, 3 to 6 days, those foods and the nutrients that we need to flood our body with to really replenish the nutrients that we're losing, they're much more important on the mineral side than it is, for example, when we're in summer, when we have all this energy to burn, when we think about how our hormones are optimized, estrogen on our side, we've not got our hormones plummeting in the way that we have before our period. So you want to also monitor the nuances that your body demands from your energy throughout the 28 days for women, while still keeping in check with what that looks like broken down into 24 hours. So I hope that that's given you some just thoughts and ideas around how you can optimize a little bit more how you eat for energy and how you think about the circadian rhythms, and also for women, how we bring in the infradian rhythm, and how you therefore reach peak performance by having optimal energy, being able to sustain your energy by using our natural biological cycles to think about when we eat, as opposed to an outside conditioning from our environment that we have to eat at certain times, and therefore we eat according to that, but not in tune with what our body really needs. And if you want to learn more about anything related to how you can manage your energy in all areas of your life, then make sure you subscribe. If you found this video helpful, please do give it a like so that more people can see it. I'm so excited about just sharing more of this content around energy management for us as individuals and leaders to be able to really think about what I always say is our most precious resource, our energy. So leave me a comment below and let me know, what did you like about the video, what resonated with you, or any questions that you have. And I always say that if you want to learn a little bit more deeper about this lifestyle, and once you're subscribed, then you might also want to check out my newsletter, because that's where I'm really sharing my day-to-day journey, my story, the stories of my clients, and what it's like to use energy as our measurement of success. So thank you, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.